She vowed he'd regret it, but the drifter chose her side. They tied her to a splintered fence post in the desert heat, left her lips cracked, her dress torn, her wrists bleeding raw against the rope. The vultures circled low, waiting for her last breath. And when a stranger's shadow finally fell across her, she didn't beg for life. She whispered through broken lips, "You'll regret this." Why would a drifter risk his fate for a woman abandoned to die beneath the merciless Wild West sky? The desert bled into twilight, all copper sky and bone-white dust. A woman lay bound against a splintered fence post, wrists rubbed raw from coarse rope. Her lips cracked, her voice nearly gone. Yet when his shadow fell across her, broad hat brim cutting the last of the light, she forced her throat to whisper, "You'll regret this." The drifter didn't answer. His knife glinted once, clean and sharp, and the rope snapped with a dull twang. She collapsed forward, coughing, but he caught her under the arms, steadying her like he'd done it before. His eyes held none of the mercy his hands betrayed. Storm gray, unreadable. Behind them the land stretched endless. Buzzards circled low as though already claiming her. He tipped his head toward the horizon. "Can you walk?" She didn't reply, just stared at him, anger and gratitude fighting in her face. Every step across that brittle earth felt like defiance. Her dress, once cream, was now the color of dust. He carried her canteen to her lips, but she turned away. "I don't owe you thanks," she muttered. He only shrugged. The silence between them cut deeper than words. What kind of man saves a stranger who swears he'll regret it? A foolish one, or one running from his own regrets. A howl of coyotes rose from the gulch. The drifter paused, scanning the ridges. Not animals, riders. Their echo was too heavy, too measured. Whoever tied her up hadn't ridden far. He clenched his jaw. He'd bought himself more than a burden. He'd bought an enemy's wrath. Her breath hitched, realizing it too. She grabbed his sleeve, nails biting through the fabric. "If you're wise, you'll leave me here. Go your own way." His boots sank into the red dust, his frame taut as wire. He glanced once at the rising moon, then at her trembling hand. "Can't do that!" In the distance, the riders grew louder. The desert held its breath. And the woman who vowed he'd regret saving her now walked beside him into the dark, straight toward the men who wanted her gone. The storm rolled in faster than the riders. Wind howled over the plains, pushing sheets of rain across the land until the horizon vanished. By the time the drifter spotted an old barn leaning against the storm's fury, the woman's legs had given out. He lifted her, awkward, heavy, yet stubborn as a mule, and carried her through the doors, just as the sky cracked with lightning. Inside, the air smelled of rot and hay gone sour. Holes in the roof let down silver spears of rain. He laid her on a pile of burlap, shaking water from his hat. She refused to meet his eyes. Instead, she pressed her knees to her chest, guarding secrets he hadn't asked for. For hours, the storm battered the barn. He stoked a small fire in a rusted tin pan, heat flickering against his jawline. She watched him through the smoke. He offered bread, dry, nearly stone, but she took it, hands trembling. Small mercies exchanged in silence, yet she never softened. Each glance at him carried the weight of her vow, "You'll regret this." And each time the thunder cracked, she flinched as if expecting doors to burst open. When dawn crawled gray across the boards, the storm had passed, but the real threat had not. He cracked open the door, scanning the drenched fields. Hoofprints cut deep into the mud. They hadn't come inside, but they'd been close, watching, waiting. In town, folks whispered about the barn. Two strangers hiding from the rain, one of them a woman with a price on her head. The sheriff's men rode slow past the saloon, their eyes narrowing whenever her name surfaced. The drifter felt their stares even from miles away. He knew what it meant. By saving her, he had marked himself too. She broke the silence at last, voice low as the dying fire. "They won't stop, and neither will I. You should have let me rot." He looked at her, not with pity, but with the steel of a man already in too deep. "Storm's past," he said, pulling on his coat. "But trouble's just catching up." And outside, fresh hoofbeats splashed through the mud, drawing closer to the barn. Night came soft, with a thin crescent moon that barely lit the barn's broken beams. The riders had not pushed through yet, but their shadows lingered at the edge of thought. The drifter sharpened his knife by the glow of a lantern, its scrape steady as a heartbeat. Across from him, the woman bound her wrists with cloth he'd torn from his shirt, covering the angry rope burns. She said nothing, but her eyes flickered every time the blade caught the light. He noticed and slid it back into its sheath, letting silence stretch. Instead, he pulled a small tin of ointment from his pack and set it between them. She frowned. "Why?" He shrugged. "Stop scars from festering." Her fingers hesitated before she dabbed some across her skin. She hissed at the sting, then whispered almost against her will, "You don't even know my name." He didn't press, just waited. At last, she murmured, "Maribel." Her voice carried both pride and sorrow, as if the name itself was a weight. The drifter nodded once. "Ethan." For a time, neither spoke again. Instead, the fire did the talking, popping, glowing, wrapping them in its fragile warmth. Maribel leaned against the wall, feigning sleep, but her lashes trembled as she watched him. He draped a blanket over her shoulders without a word, and though she kept still, her breathing changed. Softer, less guarded. The night deepened, shadows stretching across the boards. Outside, an owl screeched, sharp and sudden. Maribel jolted awake. Ethan steadied her with a quiet hand to her arm. "Still here," he said. She stared at him, searching for deception, finding only weary truth. For the first time, her warning faltered. A pause long enough for tension to coil before the call slipped in like a whisper of wind. Out here in the Wild West, every choice carved its mark. If this tale has gripped you so far, don't ride on without us. Subscribe and stay close, because the next turn may test them in ways neither can endure. And as if on cue, the barn shuddered with a distant rumble. Not thunder, hooves. Dawn cracked open the sky in a smear of pale gold, but the sound beneath it was darker, hoofbeats pounding steady across the wet earth. Ethan was already at the door, pistol drawn though his hand barely shook. Maribel stood behind him, hair tangled, eyes burning. She clutched the blanket he'd given her like a shield. Through the morning haze, riders emerged, 4 silhouettes, coats whipping in the wind. Their horses kicked up mud with every stride. No lawmen's badges glinted. These were hunters, the kind who didn't care about courts or mercy. Maribel's breath hitched. "They found me." Ethan didn't turn. "Who are they?" "Men paid to silence me." Her voice cracked. "I saw what wasn't meant to be seen." The riders reined up hard, mud splattering the barn's walls. One leaned forward, voice cutting the dawn. "Hand her over, Drifter. She ain't yours to keep." For a moment, the world narrowed to breath and heartbeat. Ethan could feel Maribel's trembling, could taste the fear she tried to bury. He lowered his pistol, but didn't step aside. "Not happening," he said. A long silence followed, broken only by the restless snorts of horses. One hunter spat into the mud. "Then you've chosen your grave." Maribel grabbed Ethan's arm, desperate. Don't throw your life for mine." He shook her off gently, eyes locked on the riders. "Already did when I cut that rope." The air was so tense it could split. A hawk cried overhead, the sound slicing through the moment like fate's reminder. One rider shifted in his saddle, reaching for steel. Ethan's jaw tightened. The standoff was seconds from shattering. Every story reaches a crossroad. And in the Wild West, choices ride faster than bullets. What Ethan decides now will either bind them or bury them. The rider's hands hovered over holsters. Ethan's finger brushed his trigger. Maribel's eyes widened, lips parted with a wordless plea. Then the lead hunter shouted, and the barn doors shook with the force of the coming fight. The first shot never came. Instead, the barn doors burst open from behind, slamming against the walls. Another group of riders swept in, lawmen, badges glinting in the morning light. Mud sprayed, horses reared, and for a heartbeat the hunters faltered. Ethan seized the moment. He yanked Maribel behind a stack of crates, shielding her as the barn erupted into chaos. Shouts clashed with the thunder of hooves, wood splintered under stray bullets, and the air turned sharp with gunpowder. Maribel clutched his coat, whispering, "Why won't you let me go?" His answer was raw, low. "Because you're not theirs to take." In the swirl of dust and noise, one hunter broke through the lawman's line, lunging toward her with a blade. Maribel's scream cut the air, but Ethan was faster. His pistol cracked once, echoing like judgment across the barn. The hunter fell hard, mud swallowing the last of his breath. The others fled, lawmen on their heels. Silence followed, broken only by the drip of rainwater from the rafters. Ethan lowered his gun, shoulders heaving. Maribel stared at him, tears tracing dirt on her cheeks. "You should hate me," she whispered. "I warned you. Saving me would ruin you." Ethan holstered his weapon, eyes steady on hers. "Maybe it already has." He reached out, lifting her chin the way a man steadies a horse on the edge of bolting. "But I'll carry that ruin, if it means you live." For the first time, her defiance melted. Not gone, never gone, but softened into something that felt like trust. The vow she'd hurled at him in the desert had changed. No longer a curse, now a bond. Outside, the red earth stretched wide, washed clean by the storm. The future was uncertain, the road dangerous. Yet as they stepped from the barn together, the sun cut through the clouds, painting the land in fire and promise. Narration lingered, voice folding into the wind. If Maribel's courage and Ethan's choice stirred something inside you, don't leave this trail untaken. Like this tale, subscribe and ride with us into the next story. Because out here in the Wild West, love may be rarer than water, but it always finds a way.